Cool. How we doing, folks? Having a good day? Very good. All right, let's get into it. That's a chat input thing, right? We know this because there's a blinking cursor. Looks like we can say something, right? There's a placeholder. It says ask the chatbot something. But past that, we don't really know what to do here, right? We don't know what this chatbot knows. We don't know what we need to tell it for it to be able to do something. We don't know what it can do in the first place. So that's what I'm going to talk about. My name is Jason. I'm a staff software engineer at GitHub, and I work on copilot-y things. That means some of the sort of fundamental pieces of GitHub Copilot, but most importantly, the sort of platform-level functionality that we need to build to support all of the sort of future-facing Copilot AI-powered stuff at GitHub. Now, I am not a data scientist. I'm pretty sure I know how to spell AI. I'm just sort of a regular software engineer, HTTP apps, CRUD stuff, that kind of stuff. That's an important part of what I'm going to talk about today because I've discovered that LLMs are, in fact, not magic. So I was asked to join the Copilot team to move a whole bunch of stuff forward. And when I joined this really cool organization with this amazing ID extension, all based around machine learning, I was like, I don't know what to do. I don't know anything about this space. But I read this quote from a teammate in some Google Doc somewhere, and it really resonated. Basically, what he's saying is that LLMs, machine learning, AI, they're just another tool in the toolbox. They seem really magical, they seem special, and they're pretty friggin' cool, but so are databases, so are caches, right? They're a tool that we use to build features. The LLMs are not the features themselves. So this was very helpful for my understanding. This is an example of how I think we sort of look at things right now, or how a lot of people see it, where this LLM is this magical thing that sits in the middle of everything, and this is the feature, and this is what we're delivering to customers. But no, I think it's much closer to this other really beautiful diagram that I made, where it's just one of the many tools that your different services integrate with so that eventually you send something over to your customer and your customers can use it and they get a lot of value out of it, hopefully. So I think we've established that LLMs are not magic, and actually Faisal's talk just before was fantastic, went into the depths of it, and that's super cool. And because they're not magic, they're not going to solve all your problems, right? They're not going to save you from a bad user experience. They're not going to fix all of your product stuff just because you put a chat window and sort of open up the LLM to your users. So talking about chat. Chat is always, by design, the least structured way for using an AI, not for interfacing with it, but just for sort of getting the value out of an AI, right? You're just kind of asking users to come to this mystical tool and figure out what it is that they need to do. Chat experiences are vague by definition in how, or are limiting in how vague they are, right? They sort of don't steer the user to doing what it is as the product builders that this thing is designed to do. Now, there's an obvious exception to this rule, which is ChatGPT, or ChatGPT-like stuff. And these are an exception because they are sort of a jack-of-all-trades, master of none, right? As Faisal said in his talk, this was trained on a lot of stuff, a lot of different stuff, but not anything very specific, right? That means that it's not going to know about your repository. It's not going to know about your math homework. It's just going to know whatever you tell it, ish. And that's a great sell. That makes ChatGPT extremely valuable. Having a jack of all trades is pretty great. But as product builders, as we're looking to integrate AI and the power of these mystical LLMs into existing user workflows, it's not really enough. So this blog post from Amelia Wattenberger, who's an amazing researcher, engineer, maker, called Why Chatbots Are Not the Future. I read this. I was nodding the whole way through. You should definitely give it a read. I'll share the slides in the Discord so that you can all click on the button. But I pulled out a couple of quotes here. So she says, the interface looks the same as a Google search box or a couple of other ones, and it's true, right? The interface for a chat experience looks like the same interface for a login form or for, a checkout form, right? It's just text boxes, which means it doesn't really give you the affordances to understand what you're trying to do, what the limitations are. She also writes that good tools make it clear how they should be used. And that's true, right? You get so many support requests, customer friction issues and stuff like that by people saying, hey, I'm holding it wrong. I don't understand what I'm trying to do here, right? And there's this fantastic book called The Design of Everyday Things. It gets quoted a lot. And it's a book about intentionally designing things that exist in the real world. And the sort of primary example is this concept of Norman doors. And a Norman door is a door that you look at it and you go, I don't know what to do here. Do I pull? Do I push? Which way does it open? So this door looks pretty straightforward. You push down on the handle, you walk forwards, good design. This door, super duper unclear. There's handles, but it looks like you can push, but the hinges are on the outside. So I think it goes this way. But how do you know what to do? And it's sort of similar with these chat interfaces, right? These text boxes. You just kind of look at it and hope that your first attempt is going to be right, and then you go back and forth and back and forth. And it's very unwieldy, right? So let's look at some real-world examples. A couple of months ago, we announced Copilot X. There's a link over there. And Copilot X is going to be some new Copilot features. We talk about Copilot now, and I think the main thing that comes to mind is the IDE extension for code completion. Reasonably, it's really friggin' cool. But we want to bring that sort of AI-powered intelligence across GitHub. So these are some of the things that we've announced. We'll look at these. First is GitHub Copilot Chat. So this is going to be a chat window inside of VS Code so that you can ask it questions, you can ask it to write your unit tests. That's what I think is in here. And it's really cool, but it suffers from chat, right? It suffers from, this is just a text box. What do I do with it? Now, a really important part of this is this little button on the bottom, Analyze and Debug. It's what we call an icebreaker. It's an entry point to unstructured chat, but it's a structured entry point to unstructured chat, right? It's that first step in getting over this ambiguous text box. I want to see more of this stuff across everything. One that I'm really excited about here is AI-generated PR descriptions. Now, this is a very GitHub-specific feature, but of course, hopefully it'll be really useful, right? And the intent is that you can say, hey, given this diff, given this pull request that I'm about to open, do something to help me write a description, right? Write it for me, suggest it to me, something like that. But whatever happens, it's getting whatever context GitHub decides to give it, right? I'm not getting into this sort of flow where I can sort of direct it, unless there's chat, right? Chatbots are not all bad. Sometimes it can be a really, really effective tool for dialogue, for refinement. So, yeah, I didn't write this, a chatbot wrote it. So given this flow, this is imaginary, this is not anything that we've talked about, but let's imagine a scenario in which you start to open a pull request. You press this little description please button. The LLM comes in and it says, here is a sort of generic description given what context I, the LLM, have from the diff, the repository metadata, maybe you as an author, your previous contributions, that kind of stuff, right? But then in this hypothetical scenario, I can enter a dialogue with the chatbot thing and say, hey, I want some more detail on this change because I, as the pull request author, I have the most context, right? I know what's happening in this change. I know the intent, I know the motivation behind it, and so I can ask the LLM to be more specific. And so you get into this loop of initial context, user intent, user refinement. Generate, refine, generate, refine. You generate again. And eventually, you get to a place where you can say, accept, I'm done, I like this, right? And I really appreciate having this little button in my extremely well-made diagram here, right? The use description button, because we're not trying to generate a string. That's not the intent. The intent is to give you a pull request description. If we're just giving you a string and you got to copy paste it from one place to another, we're leaving a lot of like potential user flow on the table. What we want to do is make it easier for you to write a pull request. So grounding this sort of like ambiguous, mystical AI response into the thing that you were trying to do in this structured flow makes a lot of sense. So just recapping here, generate, refine, generate again, that whole loop, letting users have control as they go without getting sort of too off in the distance of whatever the chatbot's trying to do. So on that topic, I want to talk about hallucinations. Hallucinations, yeah, it's a really weird topic because it's this thing that's like just generally accepted in AI tooling right now. I did a quick Google. This was the first thing, and it is unfortunately very accurate. A hallucination is when an LLM generates factually incorrect information, but it like looks really real, right? It looks like it could be true. And that's just like a thing that is accepted. It's a limitation of large language models. It's a limitation of AI because it only has the information that we've provided to it. And then it has to guess, it has to predict, try to figure out what's next, right? But if it doesn't have the information to do that, it's making an educated guess. And educated guesses can be wrong. That's a hallucination. So a concrete example, let's just say for a moment we had this chatbot in GitHub where you could say, hey, chatbot, list me the duplicate issues in this repository. In this hypothetical scenario, the chatbot would have access to the corpus of issues in a particular repository, all of the titles, the contents of those issues, and it would be able to infer, based on the intent, not just like simple string matching, which are duplicate. So I ask it, and it reports to me 12 and 18 are duplicate, and 31, 42, and 90 are duplicate. But in this hypothetical scenario, issue number 90 doesn't exist. It just kind of made it up. And that's like a thing that could happen. Now, it shouldn't, right? That's the whole point of refinement and providing context. And you'll go back and forth, and you'll do your prompt crafting, and you'll sort of eliminate many hallucinations, but it'll still happen, right? So it's going to be a weird user experience when we say, hey, issue 90 is a duplicate. You go and click on it, and where'd it go? So what I think we need is some kind of raw response to filter to hallucination mitigation, which is a really hard thing to say, right? You need something that takes the raw output from this mystical LLM, grounds it in reality, right? Does a database lookup based on some strings that are in this, giant string, right? Actually determines, based on whatever weird raw string it got back, looks up in a database, uses our existing primitives to not just guess, but confidently say, yes, this thing actually exists. We double-checked. And sometimes that's going to mean filtering stuff out. Sometimes that's going to mean just rejecting the entire response as a whole and saying, maybe try again, or you had your chance, we couldn't do it, sorry. And that's going to be a really bad experience, right? But a much better way to present this is not just, here's a string, right? This is a little bit closer to the GitHub UI, where we show issues with their title, the number, and the like open closed status at the front, right? Using an icon. And as you can see, we filtered out number 90 because that thing doesn't exist. So that brings us to our wrap-up TLDR. Chat UX is usually bad. It has some really interesting and applicable use cases, but when we're talking about like user-focused features that exist in this existing flow, chat UXs probably aren't the best thing. But icebreakers as a way to get into that chat dialogue can be amazing, because then you get into this dialogue as a refinement flow, taking in user input, refining whatever the LLM first generated. But then before you actually present that to the user, you need to ground it in reality, do some database lookups, make sure that the things that the AI says exist actually exist, and then don't just present it as strings, present it as primitives, present it as UI components, right? Present it as something that is more real than a string. That's it. Thank you very much.